O Pioneers, Part 2, Chapter 8. On the evening of the day of Alexandra's call at the Shabatas, a heavy rain set in. Frank sat up until a late hour reading the Sunday newspapers. One of the Goulds was getting a divorce, and Frank took it as a personal affront. In printing the story of the young man's marital troubles, the knowing editor gave a sufficiently colored account of his career, stating the amount of his income and the manner in which he was supposed to spend it. Frank read English slowly, and the more he read about this divorce case, the angrier he grew. At last, he threw down the page with a snort. He turned to his farmhand, who was reading the other half of the paper. By God, if I have that young feller in the hayfield once, I show him something. Listen here what he'd do with his money. And Frank began the catalogue of the young man's reputed extravagances. Marie sighed. She thought it was hard that the Goulds, for whom she had nothing but goodwill, should make her so much trouble. She hated to see the Sunday newspapers come into the house. Frank was always reading about the doings of rich people and feeling outraged. He had an inexhaustible stock of stories about their crimes and follies, how they bribed the courts and shot down their butlers with impunity whenever they chose. Frank and Lou Bergson had very similar ideas, and they were two of the political agitators in the county. The next morning broke clear and brilliant, but Frank said the ground was too wet to plow, so he took the cart and drove over to St. Agnes to spend the day at Moses Marcel's saloon. After he was gone, Marie went out to the back porch to begin her butter-making. A brisk wind had come up and was driving puffy white clouds across the sky. The orchard was sparkling and rippling in the sun. Marie stood looking toward it wistfully, her hand on the lid of the churn, when she heard a sharp ring in the air, the merry sound of the whetstone on the scythe. That invitation decided her. She ran into the house, put on a short skirt and pair of her husband's boots, caught up in a tin pail, and started for the orchard. Emile had already begun work and was mowing vigorously. When he saw her coming, he stopped and wiped his brow. His yellow canvas leggings and khaki trousers were splashed to the knees. "Don't let me disturb you, Emile. I'm going to pick cherries. Isn't everything beautiful after the rain? Oh, but I'm glad to get this place mowed. When I heard it raining in the night, I thought maybe you would come and do it for me today. The wind wakened me. Didn't it blow dreadfully? Just smell the wild roses. They are always so spicy after a rain. We never had so many of them in here before. I suppose it's the wet season. Will you have to cut them too?" "If I cut the grass, I will," Emile said teasingly. "What's the matter with you? What makes you so flighty?" "Am I flighty? I suppose it's the wet season too, then. It's exciting to see everything growing so fast and to get the grass cut. Please leave the roses till last if you must cut them. Oh, I don't mean all of them. I mean that low place down by my tree where there are so many. Aren't you splashed? Look at the spider webs all over the grass. Goodbye. I'll call you if I see a snake." She tripped away, and Emile stood looking after her. In a few moments he heard the cherries dropping smartly into the pail, and he began to swing his scythe with that long, even stroke that few American boys ever learn. Marie picked cherries and sang softly to herself, stripping one glittering branch after another, shivering when she caught a shower of raindrops on her neck and hair. And Emile mowed his way slowly down toward the cherry trees. That summer the rains had been so many and opportune that it was almost more than Shabata and his man could do to keep up with the corn. The orchard was a neglected wilderness. All sorts of weeds and herbs and flowers had grown up there, splotches of wild larkspur, pale green and white spikes of horehound, plantations of wild cotton, tangles of foxtail and wild wheat. South of the apricot trees, cornering on the wheat field, was Frank's alfalfa, where myriads of white and yellow butterflies were always fluttering above the purple blossoms. When Emile reached the lower corner by the hedge, Marie was sitting under her white mulberry tree, the pail full of cherries beside her, looking off at the gentle, tireless swelling of the wheat. "Emile," she said suddenly. He was mowing quietly about under the tree so as not to disturb her. "What religion did the Swedes have away back, before they were Christians?" Emile paused and straightened his back. "I don't know. About like the Germans, wasn't it?" Marie went on as if she had not heard him. The Bohemians, you know, were tree worshippers before the missionaries came. Father says the people in the mountains still do queer things sometimes. They believe that trees bring good or bad luck. Emile looked superior. Do they? Well, which are the lucky trees, I'd like to know. I don't know all of them, but I know lindens are. The old people in the mountains plant lindens to purify the forest and to do away with the spells that come from the old trees they say have lasted from heathen times. I'm a good Catholic, but I think I could get along with caring for trees if I hadn't anything else. That's a poor saying, said Emile, stooping over to wipe his hands in the wet grass. Why is it? If I feel that way, I feel that way. I like trees because they seem more resigned to the way they have to live than other things do. I feel as if this tree knows everything I ever think of when I sit here. When I come back to it, I never have to remind it of anything. I begin just where I left off. Emile had nothing to say to this. He reached up among the branches and began to pick the sweet, insipid fruit, long, ivory-colored berries tipped with faint pink, like white coral, that fall to the ground unheeded all summer through. He dropped a handful into her lap.